I think the US was fed false information by their allies, saying that, oh, if you decapitate the leadership and do some shock and awe bombing, the people who have been protesting for women's rights and against the clerics, against the Ayatollah, they'll feel inspired, and then they'll do the rest. They'll go and do a reverse 1979. They'll go storm the palace and turn it into a magic, fake democracy like Ukraine. Some sort of Maidan-style revolution. Now, that didn't happen because there are also proud people that, even those people who were begging for US intervention among the diaspora and within Iran, they said that this is not what we wanted. And now it's going to radicalize them as well. They're not going to trust the US. That's backfired on them, on the US very badly, and on the members of Iranian civil society and the diaspora who are cheering this on.
Namaste, everyone. Welcome to this episode of Bodha, which is also a Nitividhana special. And as you know, Nitividhana is our civilisational public policy program, of which Ruchir Sharma, who we're joined by today, is also a part of. He's given lectures as part of that series. And he's our resident sort of geopolitical analyst and commentator. And he's very active on Twitter if you want to follow him there. And he always has very insightful takes on most geopolitical issues. So today's episode of Bodha is an attempt to sort of cut through the noise surrounding one of the most dangerous geopolitical crises, I feel, of this century that we've seen so far, that's been escalating between the United States, Iran, and Israel, and sort of the broader geopolitical power struggle that's unfolding around it, struggle for resources, etc. And while the recent headlines have been focused on the aggression, the naval blockades, the military infrastructure, and the threats, the threats around the Strait of Hormuz and the access and all of that, we want to sort of unpack what's beneath all this and what's unfolding. And so who better to speak with than Ruchir Sharma. I've prepared a very detailed list of questions, so this might be a little long, but we hope that you will stay to the end, and where we'll discuss, India's and Pakistan's role in all this, and a lot of different aspects of this, unfolding crisis. So welcome, Ruchirji, and so happy to have you here. And I know it's going to be a scintillating conversation today.
Well, thank you so much, Priya. And namaste, everyone, to all our viewers. It's great to join you once again and to discuss, as we mentioned, a very important geopolitical development that's happening in front of our eyes.
Yeah. So I'll for people who haven't seen it though, we did have a previous discussion on the Venezuela and that crisis also. So check that out if you haven't. Right now, I'm just going to jump into the questions that I've prepared. And starting with, can you give us an overview of the history of this conflict? Because I know it runs deep. It runs, it's almost a century since this conflict has taken root. So what has the, US interference, been like in this conflict, and how has this involvement even, played out?
Sure. So if we look at the past 100 years, or more accurately, the past 105 years, so since 1921, there's been extensive Anglosphere interference in Iran. And it started off with the British, as many things did. And this was also a hangover. So even in the 19th century, there was what was called the Great Game between Great Britain and, at that time, the Empire of Russia, where they were trying to gain dominance and influence over Central Asia, and then Iran as the core of that region, which connects India to the Ottoman Empire. In the 1920s, the British had established themselves as the primary oil producer within Persia, within Iran, and what's now known as British Petroleum started off as the Anglo-Iranian Oil Corporation. So to protect these interests, these commercial interests, as we are familiar with in India, the British came in for commercial interests, and then to protect those, they developed political influence and intelligence operations. So, in order to do that, they deposed the Qajar dynasty, and with their support, they brought the Pahlavi dynasty to power. So Raza Shah was the first Shah under the Pahlavi dynasty, who was propped up by the West, propped up by Britain at the time, and with the understanding that Britain's oil interests in Persia would be protected. Now, this continued for about 35 years. And then in the 50s, the Iranian people in a free and democratic election elected Mohammad Mossadegh as their prime minister. And Mossadegh was a very respected intellectual, and he had a very popular political promise, and that was to nationalize the oil production assets of the Anglo-Iranian Oil Corporation, so that the oil revenues from their own country, from their own territory, could be used for the welfare of their own people. Because at the time, the Iranian people were very poor. The state itself was strong, prestigious, powerful, but at the grassroots, that explains the support, that Mossadegh was immensely popular. But of course, seeing this as a direct threat to their commercial interests, the British, and at this point, it's 10 years after World War II, their influence has declined. They don't have any territories left in the Indian subcontinent. They've exited from a lot of their colonies. And the process of exiting from their African colonies, they turned to the US. And the US essentially inherited Britain's colonial mentality in Iran. And they ensured that Mohammad Mossadegh was deposed in a coup d'etat, which led to a great backlash among the people. And at the time, the Shah of Iran had even fled. He had run out of the country to Italy, I believe, because he was scared what would happen. And then once Mossadegh was gotten rid of by the British and the Americans, then he came back and unleashed a reign of terror. They created a very feared domestic intelligence service called SAVAK, who were known for picking up people, torturing them. It really broke the back of any popular resistance or nostalgia for the Mossadegh era. Now, during the same time, as the Americans got more and more involved in protecting the Shah from democratic elections or from any threat to nationalize their oil assets of Western companies, the Shah became, so this is the son of Reza Shah, Mohammad Reza, became very, very pro-American, basically acting as an American ally from there on. This meant that Iran did well economically. It got access to a lot of high-tech American military technology and was used as a proxy in the region. They had quite good relations with the West as a result, with the UK, with France, with the US, and were actually quite antagonistic towards India. That even though the Shah, so Mohammad Reza Shah Pahlavi, he was trying to revive Persepolis and ancient Persian culture, which I know many Indians find some affinity with, and try to de-emphasize radical Islamist tendencies within his country. From a foreign policy perspective, he was quite hostile to India. And because he was associated with the coup d'etat against Mossadegh, because he was cracking down on radical Islamists, because he was seen as spending wasteful amounts of money on vanity projects like the Persepolis Festival or reviving the legacy of Cyrus and Darius and these pre-Islamic figures. That led to a lot of resentment, that there were many religious Shias who were against him, saying that, oh, he's going against Islam. There were many communists and leftists within the country who said that, oh, when the people are poor, but money is being spent on vanity projects, we don't get any of the oil revenue to make our lives better. And then there are many Democrats who felt that, oh, they had the chance to vote for their own prime minister, and then it was cruelly denied to them. So there was a groundswell of resentment against the Shah. He was not always fully informed by his yes men of the depth of that resentment. And then he tried to send the biggest troublemakers abroad into exile. And that's where Khomeini comes in. So Khomeini was seen as a big troublemaker, a very conservative Shia cleric, a very austere and severe man. He was thrown out of Iran. And a little known fact, initially they tried to send him to India. They tried to send him to Lucknow. And thankfully, at the time, the Indian government gave the right level of excuses to prevent that from happening. So he went to Iraq, and then to Turkey, and then to France. And in exile, this actually backfired. In exile, he got lots of friendly media coverage. He was seen sympathetically by his host countries and by the Western media. And eventually, the groundswelling of resentment against the Shah led to the Iranian Revolution of 1979, wherein it was mostly students who led a movement to depose the Shah. He was dying of cancer at the time and went to the US for treatment. And this alliance between the Iranian Communist Party, Tudeh, and the conservative Shia clerics led to the 1979 revolution, which is now called the Islamic Revolution. It led to Iran becoming an Islamic republic. And most famously, during this revolution, the American embassy was besieged by the protesters and then occupied, with many US embassy staff being taken hostage. And that lasted a long time. It was very embarrassing to the US. It led to the end of Jimmy Carter's presidency. He was seen as weak because he couldn't prevent that, B, resolve it. And that was probably one of the biggest humiliations that the US has ever faced, more so than Vietnam, where they can claim that, oh, it was a stalemate and they withdrew. In this, they had no agency at all. That their diplomatic staff, their CIA agents were taken prisoner, taken hostage for over a year. So since then, the US has not maintained diplomatic relations with Iran, which means they don't have a direct finger on the pulse of the country. So what do? They have a network of proxies in the region. The US is very close, of course, as we know, to Israel. It's very close to the Sunni monarchies of the Gulf, with the Emirates, with Qatar, with Saudi Arabia, with Kuwait, and it's very close to Pakistan. So now you have a bunch of countries that are pro-American and who have historical resentments against Iran.
Right.
None of these countries like Iran. So the Sunni monarchies don't like Iran because Iran is the actual cradle of civilization there. It's the most prestigious, longest lasting country, political entity in the region. Israel dislikes Iran because it's the only country it can't control via America. All the others, Israel has a tenuous peace with every other country in the region, despite wars in the past. Egypt is basically kept in line by the US. Jordan is kept in line. The Saudis and Emiratis are instructed to behave nicely with Israel, even if they don't have direct diplomatic contact. They all, play together, except Iran. Iran doesn't want to be part of that system. And then, of course, Pakistan, for whom Iran is a rival Islamic republic and the wrong kind. So Pakistan is dominated by the Sunni Punjabi military and feudal elite, and they have insecurity and resentment against a civilization state like Iran, whereas they're a garrison state. So as a result, you have all of these countries feeding information to the US about Iran, and Iran doesn't gather any, and the US doesn't gather any direct intel about the region. And much of the US policy around Iran since 1979 has been influenced by that. A, by the humiliation, and B, that their proxies tell them what to do. And in this case, in the last 3 to 4 months, what has happened is that there is a administration that is much more receptive to this input than before. Earlier, this input was gathered as if Iran, as if Israel, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia were service providers, and the presidency or the White House, the Pentagon would receive this intel input and then make an informed decision. Generally, some sort of hostility towards Iran, but without actual military conflict. Now, in this case, there's a much more receptive environment, and essentially what Israel and specifically Netanyahu realized is that he didn't need to be a service provider anymore. He could instruct them what to do and could manipulate the Trump administration very easily. We could say that, and he's done it before. Everyone ignored him earlier. He was always like, Iran is 3 minutes away from making a nuclear bomb. He goes to the UN General Assembly and shows like a crudely drawn diagram. And they would, Obama now last week, he made some appearance on a TV show or a podcast where he very proudly said that, I managed to reduce Iran's enriched uranium by 97% without any military conflict. So they still, wanted to suppress Iran, but without putting any of their own troops at risk. What changed now is that they swallowed the whole narrative from Israel and its partners, and actually went and engaged Iran in military conflict. And that's where we are today. The blockade, the bombings, the whole region being dragged into a surprise conflict is because of that.
Right. So the current state is because of this fomentation brought on by Israel. Like you said, it's kind of taking advantage of the Trump administration. Again, the US is not in proximity of any Iranian nuclear weapons. It would be Israel that is at risk, if at all. Obama probably, in my opinion at least, didn't do much in terms of, helping the conflict along, but rather, he was focused on other areas of this region, I feel, and therefore didn't really intervene in particular one, or he would have. He
did the civilian nuclear deal so that he could, end Iran's access to enriched uranium and make the Israelis happy through that, and the rest of the Gulf states as well happy through that. But that was about it. Yes.
Exactly. So, where are the US and Iran strategically positioned in the war right now, after the closure of the Strait and the blockade, etc.?
So, although this conflict was a surprise to the international community, it's something that Iran has been prepared for a long time. There's even a quote where they say, death to America is not a slogan, it's a policy. And that doesn't mean they wish death on every American, but it means that American hegemony is something that they fundamentally are opposed to. And so they had made contingency plans. What would happen if their supreme leader was killed? What would happen if Iran was decapitated, like has been done before? That's the modus operandi of the Anglosphere, that you get rid of the top generals, the top political elite, and especially after the assassination of General Qasem Soleimani, which was a big blow to Iran. That he was considered a military and political genius. He was the one who defeated ISIS in Syria, and one of the most, I think, barbaric and infamous things in the first Trump administration was the assassination of Qasem Soleimani. After that, the Iranian political and military elite created a protocol. Well, what would happen if our leadership was decapitated? And the solution was that in such a situation, you decentralize the military command, and every separate command structure then becomes autonomous. So then it's as if, so from ancient times, there was the Shahanshah and the Satraps, the satraps, regional governors. So Iran still has a long continuity of that system. That's part of their political philosophy. So in this case, if there's no Shahanshah, then the satraps are autonomous, and they're given instructions to resist. And that's why it has proven impossible for the US or Israel to negotiate or understand what's happening, because they think that if we bomb them back to the Stone Age, that's what Hegseth said. If we pressure them and bomb civilians, shock and awe, like they tried in Iraq 25 years ago. They think that by doing so, it'll bring Iran to the negotiating table. But effectively, each of the military commanders is resisting based on this the structure that's been put in place. So that means the US is unsure of how to proceed. They've been dragged into this conflict by Israel. Israel is still having a great time. They're achieving all of their goals at very little risk to themselves, at very little cost to their own troops, because it's the US who's doing the fighting for them. They're not sending their ground troops over there. And then you have the blockade of the Hormuz Strait, which is essential for world trade. And Iran always had the possibility to do that. It's the Persian Gulf. No matter what the Arab monarchies say, they call it the Arab Gulf, the Arabian Gulf. It's the Persian Gulf for historical reasons, because Persia is the preeminent military power in that region. They could at any point have cut this off, and that should have been part of the war modeling. That's the logical thing for them to do in a defensive war. So it shows very poor planning from the US that they got conned into this. Then you have Hegseth purging the top ranks of the US military, probably because the top ranks, they are supposed to, all military officers and troops, they have an obligation to disobey illegal orders. So if an order is blatantly illegal, which means you would commit a war crime or a crime against humanity or violate sovereignty, they are obliged legally and morally to disobey those commands. I'm pretty sure that Trump and Hegseth gave orders to their top military to do something illegal in Iran. And when they disobeyed, suddenly you had this reorganization of the top ranks. I think 5 generals were released from their duties about 2 months into the conflict, or 6 weeks into the conflict. So that's very telling.
Yeah, that's a lot. And no, I wasn't aware of this, so it's like very fascinating. And perhaps it's a simplistic way to put this, but who do you think is better positioned right now to kind of win the war, and in a protracted state. It's a fight against resources essentially, but
So in this sort of war, there's definitely an advantage to the defender, the same as the Vietnam War, that one country from two continents away is trying to fight a remote control war against people whose lives and identities and civilization and ancestors are linked to essentially what's sacred soil for them. They will fight to the last man, woman, and child if they have to, and they have in the past. There was a 10-year war between Iran and Iraq, again where Iraq was used by the West to bleed out Iran, and I think it's a very difficult terrain, very different geography, very different culture or civilization to subjugate in the manner that the US and Israel think that is possible. And this is heightened by the fact that for decades, the Iranian government and more importantly, Iranian civilians have suffered under Western sanctions, and that's made them resilient. They don't have anything to lose. You've already pushed them down. You already have a boot on their neck, and now, it's not their job to make it easier for the boot on their neck to crush them. They don't want to go back to that. So it's literally, liberty or death for them. Whereas for the US, they can at any point pull out. There could be a change in administration. There could be a change in priorities, and they can just turn off the switch, send the ships back home, and act like nothing ever happened. And that's what they have done in the past. So there's very different motivation levels between the two parties, and the conditions of victory are completely different as well. The US is not even sure what its victory conditions are. They said they wanted to change the regime. Then they said, no, we don't intend to change the regime. Then they said the regime has been changed. Then they said, once Iran started blocking the Strait of Hormuz, they said, the aim of the war is to unblock the Strait of Hormuz, which was the case before the war. So that's clearly not a war goal. That's an evolved goal that you're doing in response to the situation. So they don't have a clear success or failure scenario, but the Iranians do. And that's a motivating factor for everyone. I think the US was fed false information by their allies saying that, if you decapitate the leadership and do some shock and awe bombing, the people who have been protesting for women's rights and against the clerics, against the Ayatollah, they'll feel inspired, and then they'll do the rest. They'll go and do a reverse 1979. They'll go storm the palace and turn it into a magic, fake democracy like Ukraine. Some sort of Maidan-style revolution. Now, that didn't happen because they're also proud people that, even those people who were begging for US intervention among the diaspora and within Iran, they said that this is not what we wanted. And now it's going to radicalize them as well. They're not going to trust the US. That's backfired on them, on the US very badly, and on the members of Iranian civil society and the diaspora who are cheering this on.
Right. But what do you think Israel's end goal is in all this? Because looks like even if the US doesn't have a clear picture and Iran is just defending itself against US interference and especially in its oil resources. Now, what does Israel stand to gain? Because is it dominance in the region? Is it just to neutralize like a perceived enemy? Like what sort of history is there?
Yeah, that's to neutralize the perceived enemy. So they've already succeeded in doing that with Syria. That with Assad gone, for Israel, having Al-Qaeda or ISIS in charge of Syria is not only not a problem, it's a positive, because Al-Qaeda and ISIS don't attack Israel. So they disliked Assad because he was a secular nationalist, for whom it was about Syrian nationalism, about Arab nationalism, and was not a religious fundamentalist. Israel prefers dealing with religious fundamentalists, because they're on the same side generally. So the U.S., Israel, and Islamic fundamentalists, generally Sunni extremists, generally fight on the same side against secular nationalists, against democracies, against socialist countries. So for them, it's preferable if that's the case. Now, Iran is unique because it's not Sunni. It's under Islamist radicals, but the wrong kind, the ones who can't be manipulated by the US and Israel. So what else has Israel been doing during this time? They also use this to invade and occupy Lebanon. So they've gone into Lebanese territory. That's another pesky neighbor that they have, which they're trying to neutralize. So they're using the chaos created to fold other countries in the region into submission, into the same symbiotic / dependent relationship that Jordan and Egypt have with them. This, tentative peace wherein they submit to Israeli interests, and then they're paid off by the US for that, and are part of this, security alliance. So they've done that with Syria through regime change. They're doing it to Lebanon by actually going in and occupying their territory with ground forces. With Iran, they don't have a border, but it's too big for them to conquer. So then they're using this hybrid strategy to demoralize the country, destabilize the country, and use up all of its military capacities in fighting the US invasion and bombing.
Right. Do you think the US does have an appetite for the kind of long drawn conflict that's going to end up happening if they're ever to negotiate some sort of an end to this?
No, definitely not. I think the US has lost that spirit since Vietnam. There was a time when they were willing to send their troops to fight communism or to fight for liberty and the like. But at the end of the day, Trump was elected as the anti-war candidate. His base are not in favor of the war. And his base, even the most hardcore MAGA person does not want their sons and daughters to go die for Israel in some faraway land on another continent. They want America first. And this will soon be reflected. That there's midterm elections coming up. The war being unpopular for someone as sensitive to public perceptions as Trump is a big deal. He wants to be seen as a peacemaker. The trouble is he's also easily manipulated and is surrounded by yes men. So the appetite isn't there. The appetite is to have a big win, to show to the world that I did it, we did it, and then establish peace. But that doesn't mean that they actually intend to fight the war for 2 more years. In 2 more years, then there's the next election, and I think the next president would not be in favor of keeping this war, regardless of whether the Democrats come back or an even more hardcore MAGA Republican comes to power. There's been a big backlash in the US about Israeli influence over their foreign policy and over their domestic policy as well. So you'll see the impact of that. And especially, when you see someone like Tucker Carlson, who, now that he's liberated from Fox News and can speak his own mind, has been at the forefront of saying that Trump is wrong, the administration is wrong, Israel is wrong, and this war is wrong.
Yes.
And I think he has much more influence over the electorate than Hegseth or Mark Rubio or even Trump when it comes to this issue.
Right. And again, I feel like which is why the next candidate coming in, whoever that is, will probably base their entire campaign on anti-war if it's still being drawn out at that point in time, perhaps. And let's see. But but yeah, you're right. Another.
Ideally they should, but I mean they will still be hostile to Iran. So, for example, the American vassals in Europe, they don't like the fact that the war is happening, but they blame the victim for it. They're always saying, "Oh, Iran needs to come to its senses. Iran needs to negotiate. Iran needs to end this war," and by that they mean surrender. If you say the same thing to them, that, oh, Zelensky needs to go to Moscow to negotiate, Zelensky needs to surrender, then they start crying because they have double standards. But it's going to be the same with the next candidates. They're all anti-Iran. There's no one who's apart from Tucker Carlson who took a moral stand and a legal stand that killing children is wrong, that violating sovereignty is wrong, that one magic state doesn't have a special right to exist. Either all states have an equal right to exist, or people have a right to exist, and states are socially constructed and can be formed, dissolved, created based on popular will. There's no such political candidate in the US. They'll still be anti-Iran. They'll just change the aesthetics of it. They'll say, like Obama did earlier this week, where he's like, it's wrong to have gone to war. We could have broken their backs through diplomacy. That's basically what he was saying. And that's what the moderate American candidates will say.
Makes sense. What has the role of Britain been in this conflict historically, and why are they glaringly absent from the conversation now? And do British and American corporations still hold a substantial interest in Iranian oil at this moment?
So Britain essentially, once it lost its power projection capacity after World War II, after decolonization of its imperial possessions in Asia especially, and then in Africa later, and I think culminating in the Suez crisis, when they, along with France and Israel, tried to blockade the Suez Canal, and Abdel Gamal Nasser of Egypt humiliated them. Since then, the UK has outsourced its foreign policy, especially in this region, to the US. And they are now regretting it. So they have not been in favor of the current US-Israeli action in Iran. But they can't say that out loud, because then they'll be punished by their master. And that is happening. They have been threatened by Trump for not being supportive enough as an ally. And it's the same with all of NATO, that now NATO is being shamed and bullied, and rightly so. They deserve it, because for all these decades, they cravenly, if the US said jump, they would ask how high. They don't have a mind of their own. This time, even though they never criticized the US, even though they blamed the victim, even though they said that, oh, Iran needs to surrender for there to be peace, like Macron is phoning them and telling them this. Merz is shaming Iran for resisting. But it still was not enough. It was still not enough for Trump. He wants to see absolute loyalty. He wants to see them send their troops on the ground, like was done in Iraq and in Afghanistan 25 years ago. They haven't done that, and now they're going to be punished. I don't think they should be punished for that, but I think they should be punished for weakness, that they've been weak for all these years. They've invited this upon themselves. If they had stood up for themselves earlier when other presidents were in charge, but they liked them, Biden, Obama, they're such friendly faces, of course, help them. Even George, W. Bush, he said, oh, we've been attacked. That's an attack on all the West, on all of NATO. We all need to go to Afghanistan, all need to go to Iraq. They did it. Only France stood up to that back then, and Spain withdrew after experiencing terrorism at home when they received blowback, when trains in Spain were blown up by Al-Qaeda as revenge for Spain taking part in US interventionism. That's when Spain made that change, and they pulled out of their operations in Afghanistan and Iraq. And that's why even now Spain has been the most critical, but also being facing the most criticism from the US. So the UK, I don't think they like seeing what happened, but they're completely powerless to stop it. And they're also completely powerless to criticize it. If they criticize it any more than they have, they're going to be punished very harshly, which I think they should still do if they have any moral character. But it's not a country known for its moral character.
Absolutely. And the second part of my question was, do they still stand to benefit from Iran not nationalizing its oil?
Well, no, Iranian oil has been national. After the Islamic Revolution, 1979, the Western companies were kicked out of the sector. So right now, it's, they feel that they're missing out. That, like with Venezuela, they want access to those resources. And that's one of the primary motivators for regime change. They hope that one day, if a pro-Western government comes to power in Iran, then they'll roll out the red carpet to ExxonMobil and BP and Shell to come in and privatize those resources.
Right. Makes sense. So this next few questions is going to be kind of about the US's defense capabilities. Are the defense capabilities of the US overestimated in general or during this conflict? And is the US capable of defense production like drones and munitions capable of sustaining a prolonged conflict?
That's a very good question, because we've gotten used to calling it defense. And yes, if we use the classical definition of defense, the US is very defensible. They have a very good level of defense. They have their own continent where they have complete hegemony. They only have two neighbors who are completely submitted to them economically, politically, geographically. They have a second continent under them, which is also 90% within their hegemonic system. So similarly, just like if the example I gave earlier, that Iran can be defended to the last man, woman, and child, if the US needed to actually be defended, its own territory be defended, they can do that. And they could do that for 100 years. Right. But what we're talking about is not defense, but offense. It's their offensive capacities. And it's also telling that Hegseth, Trump, and Rubio, they renamed the Department of Defense to the Department of War, because they know it's not about defending the US. The US can be defended without needing aircraft carriers all over the world and submarines lurking around every country's sovereign territory. The US can be defended without military bases in Germany or air bases in Tajikistan or submarine depots in Australia. So it's more about their offensive capabilities. Can they produce enough reliable armaments, ships, planes, missiles to project power effectively? And also, what are their goals in doing so? Is it even productive to do that, or is it counterproductive? That they have a massive nuclear arsenal. They have their aircraft carriers all over the world. They claim to protect shipping around the world with their submarines and naval power. Okay, so then it's very good for maintaining the status quo. That is, international trade in the benefit of the Western countries. Now, beyond that, when they try to use it for offensive capabilities, there's generally some level of blowback, some level of retaliation, which they're not used to. They haven't fought a ground war, troops, gun to gun, man to man in a long time. They prefer remote control wars. So you send fighter jets from your aircraft carrier. You send drones from, which are controlled from behind a computer screen. So I think the way in which they've done their operations in Iran has actually embarrassed them. That people see the limits of American power. That when it's used for offense, it didn't achieve any of their goals. It turned Iranians into heroes in the public mind. It undermined the entire alliance structure that the US had by drawing in the Gulf monarchies as military targets. So, and their entire appeal was that they were apolitical commercial centers, at the crossroads of international trade, where you could, have a state subsidized airline that, connects the world, where you had a tax haven, where big businesses relocated, where global institutions relocated. And all it took was a few strikes from Iran on their radar structures, and that ground to a halt. That is serious reputational damage for these countries. But more importantly, the US didn't come to save them when that happened. It was part of the American calculation that, we'll strike from behind our screens with the drones, we'll strike from our submarines and off the coast of Sri Lanka, we'll strike from our aircraft carriers. And then what's the stationary infrastructure that will get bombed in retaliation? It's the air radar defense systems in the Emirates, in Qatar, in Oman, and they did. And so for the Americans, our allies did the job. They're like a blood sponge. That you push them forward, they take all the damage, and then you've protected yourself. And it's the same with NATO. The whole point of having all these countries in NATO is that their citizens die, their troops die, so that the US doesn't have to. So that's shown the limits of it. I think now the allies see that the US is using them as a meat shield, as a blood sponge, and that their role is to take damage without any compensation and without any defense.
Absolutely. And I guess I want you to answer the same question about Iran and Israel. What are their, the limits of their offense capabilities, as you call it, and for Iran, of course, defense, but still.
So Israel, on the contrary, has almost unlimited offensive capabilities, often disguised as defensive capabilities. So they have something called the Samson Doctrine. So if you're familiar with the story of Samson and Delilah, that they say that if the existential security of Israel ever comes under threat, then the last thing they'll do is bring down the entire structure upon them, that they won't go down alone. So it's, they claim it's a defensive protocol, but it's actually a threat to its own allies. It's a threat. So Israel has nuclear weapons. It hides the fact. It's an open secret, but there's no one from the International Atomic Energy Agency going there. There's no one from the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty Organization going there to inspect it. Everyone knows that they secretly got nukes from apartheid South Africa, from France, and from the US. What do they intend to use the nukes for? If they ever feel that they are losing a military operation and that they're going to lose territory, that they're going to lose their garrisons, they will use the nuclear weapons against everyone, including their allies. Everyone within range will get nuked. And that also explains why, and they can't reach the US with it, but it's why the European countries are so fanatically pro-Israel. It's not out of love, it's out of fear. They don't want to be in a situation where they feel that, oh no, we couldn't save our ally, and now we're going to be punished for it. That's already happening with the US, but the US is not threatening to nuke them if they fall. They're just threatening to beat them for not being loyal enough. But Israel has this very potent weapon that they don't advertise the fact that they have nuclear weapons, but they say it in subtle ways, that, oh, we have the Samson Doctrine, that we have hidden capabilities. And they are willing. Essentially, Israel is the Zionist Pakistan. It has the same mentality in foreign policy that our own Western neighbor has, who is also nuclear armed. And those are not defensive weapons, they're offensive weapons. So in another case, if any non-Western aligned country within their region comes close to getting nuclear weapons, that's why they're so insecure about it. They want to be the sole nuclear power in the region. So Iran enriching uranium, even if it's for civilian use, is not acceptable to them. And they would also threaten to use nukes there. I even think that, with some of the rhetoric coming out of the White House in the last few months, I think it was on the table. The US was discussing using nuclear weapons in Iran, and that may have led to the purge of the top brass. That they probably refused to carry that out, or said that that's not a good idea. For many reasons, for military reasons, moral reasons, ethical reasons, legal reasons. And with Iran, their defensive capacities are being demonstrated as we speak. Their offensive capacities have been decimated because it's all now been redirected towards internal defense. But also their offensive capabilities were damaged when Assad was pushed out of Syria. And this new Al-Qaeda regime over there has really taken Syria from being part of the Iranian bloc to being part of the Anglo-Zionist bloc, Anglo-Zionist Sunni bloc. So they've lost one of their most powerful proxies. The other powerful proxy they have is Hezbollah in Lebanon, which is being decimated as well as Israel invades and occupies Lebanon. The southern provinces of Lebanon are under military occupation by Israel. So outside of its own borders, Iran does not have a great offensive capacity at the moment. But then they don't need to, because now they're fighting an existential defensive war.
Makes sense. That makes sense. And do you know also what the known extent of damage has been to the US that it's taken in this war? Because I know we've heard that they've lost several aircrafts, including Ava, and had dozens of bases in the Middle East damaged. So beyond that, do we know of the extent of the damage? Is it hurting them by any stretch?
No, I think the US, like Russia, can take unlimited damage, and it stops when they decide to stop. In the past, there have been countries which have lost 25% of their male population. I think Serbia in World War I lost 25% of its male population in the war. This is nowhere even near that for the US. The US lost equipment. They haven't had 100 coffins come back home, and the visuals of that's powerful. But even then, that happened in Iraq. It happened in Afghanistan. It's still those occupations continued for the better part of 2 decades. So I don't think that they particularly care about damage. They can always produce more planes, more ships. It's actually good for their economy. The GDP goes up the more planes and ships you make. So, in fact, the US in the past, people said that about George W. Bush, that to prevent an economic crisis, he went to war, and that boosted the economy because Lockheed Martin and Boeing and all of these defense contractors got a lot of induced demand from the war, so they could hire more people. They got bigger government contracts. They produced more. They exported more to the allies, who also had to, vassals who were dragged into these wars. So from a very cynical perspective, these big superpowers like the US or even Russia in Ukraine, Russia has lost so many troops, but they're willing to absorb that human cost and equipment cost. They've lost equipment, they've lost troops, but essentially those two countries have unlimited resources and manpower.
Makes sense. And on the whole kind of nuclear enrichment situation, what has been the role of Iran's nuclear enrichment in shaping this conflict? And is it kind of a red herring manufactured by America and Israel, or is it a genuine concern at this stage?
So, leaving aside the, let's say, geopolitical aspects of it, nobody from the actual International Atomic Energy Agency has flagged Iran's nuclear program as being anything but for civilian use. They're the
Okay.
experts. They're neutral. They're impartial, and they're representative. It's a UN agency. So it's all of the member states who have given that agency the mandate to go and inspect atomic facilities. They haven't been waving the war flag saying that, oh no, this nuclear energy program, the enrichment program for uranium has a dual use, that it's going to be misused for military purposes. This concern has been expressed in the past, for example, for North Korea, where it's credible that Pakistan smuggled its through Abdul Qadir Khan. It's Pakistani nukes that made it to North Korea. So then there was a threat of proliferation. I don't think there's been any credible accusation from an expert body saying that Iran is engaging in dual use uranium enrichment, developing a nuclear weapon, using its civilian facilities, or trying to acquire nuclear weapons from other countries. So this is a drumbeat that has been pushed from Tel Aviv for a long time. It's great for squeezing money out of the US, and it's great for convincing the US that this is something they need to do. That's why Obama is so proud that he reduced it by that he said that they got 97% of the enriched uranium out of Iran through the civilian nuclear deal, and the Iranians did take part in that in good faith. They didn't say that, oh, this is some sort of conspiracy to prevent us from developing nuclear weapons. They opened their country for the inspectors from the International Atomic Energy Agency. But what have they learned now? What have they learned now from this process? That they, in good faith, took part in a civilian nuclear deal, the JPCOA. They took part in negotiations. They played along with the agencies. What did they get? They got attacked. So now that you've cornered the lion, what is it going to do? Now there's a motivation to get nuclear weapons. The previous leadership, who have now been assassinated in US strikes, they were against Iran acquiring nuclear weapons. They thought it would be counterproductive, that it would paint a big target on the country as a rogue state. It's already suffering from accusations of being a rogue state. Acquiring nuclear weapons through the wrong channels or at all was not going to be in their favor. So the previous generation of leadership was against acquiring them. Now the new set are going to be more radicalized, and they'll learn. They'll learn from North Korea. Like, why doesn't Trump do this with North Korea? You have rabid nationalists in South Korea and in Japan who are saying, yeah, let's finish them off. They've never acted on it because North Korea can credibly defend itself. And, well, not just defend itself. The nukes are not to defend your own territory. It's to inflict pain on your rivals so that they don't think of invading your territory. And so that's the unfortunate lesson that Iran will have learned. And I don't think that nuclear weapons make any region safer. Even nuclear weapons, between India and Pakistan, have not made the subcontinent safer. It has led to more proxy wars. It's led to more hybrid warfare. The decade after the two countries acquired nuclear weapons was the highest decade of terrorism.
Absolutely.
I'm not in favor of nuclear weapons as a whole, but in this case, looking at it logically, if you were in Iran's position, what would be the lesson you learned from this entire experience of the past 20 years?
Right, you do the same thing. And like you said, Pakistan and Israel are kind of in the same boat in terms of what they're willing to do. They would happily nuke themselves if it hurts their enemy. The same doctrine. So it really doesn't, make any conflict. It doesn't lessen any conflict as such. It
just changes the way the conflict is fought. Yes.
Yeah, precisely. And why did Trump, you think, decide to walk away from the Iran deal? Do you think it's just personal megalomania, or is it some strategic reason?
Trump has a great animosity. I mean, he's a generally affable guy. If you butter him up, he responds well to it. Netanyahu is a master at that. But there's one person who Trump has had a long-standing animosity about, and that's Obama. The whole point of his first presidential run was because he was the one pushing that Obama was not born in the US. He was the one pushing the whole birther movement, that we want to see his long form birth certificate. He's motivated by great animosity towards Obama. And Obama humiliated him at the White House correspondence press dinner back in, I think, in Obama's second term, where he said, Donald Trump, you're in the audience now. You wanted to see my birth certificate. Let me show you something even better. Here's a video of my birth. And he showed the first 10 seconds of The Lion King and Simba being held up by Rafiki. So that was very humiliating for Trump, because then the camera was on him and he was embarrassed in front of the whole country. That was the seed that led to him standing for president. He won because Hillary Clinton fought a very poor campaign. She encouraged Trump's campaign within the Republican Party, thinking he was the most incompetent and thus the easiest to defeat. But that backfired. But essentially, he's very keen on erasing any of Obama's initiatives. And one of Obama's signature policies was the civilian nuclear deal with Iran. So that's just personal animosity. He wanted to undo Obama's legacy. And then I also am credibly informed that Netanyahu whispers into his ear quite often and tells him things that feed into his paranoia. He's already elderly. He's already suffered from an attempted assassination. He only remembers the last thing the last person who spoke to him told him, and then acts on it. So everyone is fighting for access, so that before he goes to sign stuff, you're the last person to have spoken to him. Netanyahu has figured that out, and he's told him that the Iranians are planning to assassinate you. You should do something. We have credible Israeli intelligence that says the Iranians are coming to assassinate you. And so then, that accelerated this. It bypassed a lot of the filters. Like he would say this stuff to Biden and Obama as well. They would ignore it and then do something moderate that kept Tel Aviv happy without upsetting the entire system. But the appeal to personal vanity, to personal security was very effective. That they tried to kill you once, now the Iranians are coming to get you. What will you do? So
so it's sort of a mix of his personal animosity for Barack Obama, and also his own quirky personality traits, and his delusion, really. But yeah, absolutely. I think that's like a really interesting answer, and I'm glad I asked you that. What about?
And he's also surrounded by yes men. People like Marco Rubio and Pete Hegseth do not challenge him. And I can give you an example of this. Apparently, Trump, to reward his inner circle, has been gifting his ministers shoes. Okay. But because he's such a big genius, he doesn't, and he wants it to be a surprise, he doesn't ask their assistance for the shoe size. He just looks at them, tells his team, I think Mark Rubio wears size 11 shoes. Mark Rubio receives size 11 shoes. He's probably a size 7. But he's so scared to upset his master that there's photos of him now with his tiny feet wearing oversized shoes. The entire cabinet are wearing oversized shoes because not one of them has the courage, even in this tiny gesture, to say that, thank you for the shoes, but they don't fit. Can I have another size?
This is hilarious. It's like the Emperor's New Clothes. Do you know that story?
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely.
So funny, yeah. My next question is what's currently known about Iran? I know you said that Iran is currently probably developing its nuclear weapons, probably increasing its stores of enriched uranium now that they're under a credible attack and they need to defend themselves in the face of
I
America.
can't say if they're doing it right now. That it would make sense if they did. Yeah.
Yeah. So how far do you think? How far do you think they are from having weaponized uranium? And I mean, they have like advanced missiles, but what do you think the situation is?
I think at this point, it's difficult to say whether this is something that they've started already amidst the current chaos, or if that's even possible in the current situation. I meant more that in the future, once they've defended themselves, then the cornerstone of their new post-war strategy would be that negotiations with the West are useless, they're futile. The West uses it to buy time and then attack you when you're not expecting it. So I expect a more belligerent future policy that once there's peace, then they would either pursue nuclear weapons themselves, or they could try to acquire them like North Korea did, like Israel did. Israel didn't develop it themselves. They borrowed, stole, were gifted it by various parties.
Right, that makes sense. Next, so this war has obviously damaged sort of American soft power, but what are the implications thus far on American hegemony? I know you're saying that some of the allies are waking up to them being sort of used in conflict, especially the rest of NATO powers, etc. Just kind of used to further American interests, American opinions, etc. So, what has been the effect on the US and perhaps on world economy? But maybe we can come to that in a bit.
Well, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing if the world realizes that America is a unreliable ally, unreliable partner. Of course, it's a painful lesson for them to learn in the short term, but healthier for all involved if they reduce dependence on the US for their security. So I think it has damaged perceptions. So among people and countries who are anti-American, this has only justified what they always believed. So there's no damage to the soft power there. But it's among the lovers of America, the most loyal, allies and supporters of America, who they're the ones who are now saying this isn't what America is about. No, it always has been, but because you benefited from it, you turned a blind eye to it. Now that you realize that it can be used against you, and in fact, it's easier to use it against you. It's easier to wield the stick against Denmark or Canada or South Korea or Japan than it is against an actual motivated adversary like Iran. Again, if we do a little mental exercise, what will the US learn from this? The US has learned that it's very difficult to fight a war against a motivated adversary. Their allies did not jump to join them as expected, and it's much easier, more fun, more satisfying to torture your allies moving forward. So now, I think once this conflict is done, once the US disengages from this conflict, their new priority will be to get their allies in line through punishment this time. In the past, it was through the promise of reward that, if you are part of NATO, then you'll be under the American nuclear umbrella, and you have the privilege of purchasing American military equipment with your taxpayer money. And you have to spend you have to spend 2% of your GDP on defense, which just meant more contracts for Lockheed Martin and the like in the US, because all NATO countries have to operate on NATO standard equipment, which means they have to import it from the US and occasionally from France or Germany. So for the US, their allies, their vassals, have the same relationship that the British Empire's colonies had with them. that it's, they're a wonderful source of materials, of cheap labor, of troops to fight your wars, of extra territory that can absorb waves of enemy attack so that your homeland is safe, so that the core metropole is safe. But also, once you extract, the cheap labor and the resources and the like, you process it all into a finished product in your country, and then you force them to buy it back. That they have a monopoly over defense expenditure in their allies. That the NATO countries, they can't buy MiGs and Sukhois from Russia, even if they wanted to. Even some of them still have legacy ones. Their pilots all trained on MiGs and Sukhois. They're forced to switch to F-15s. They're forced to switch to American equipment. So that's the value of the US allies and partners for the US. They don't actually intend to come to the defense. It's just, these are wonderful neo-colonial outposts which fight on your behalf, which give you privileged access to their markets. You can enrich yourself off them. So they expect their colonies, their vassals, to be grateful for this. And now I think they're expressing surprise that the colonies are not grateful, and they'll punish them. And that's going to be fun for all of us, because this war has been horrible, I think, in terms of human impact. The same as Venezuela, very highly illegal, terrible precedent. You can't kidnap the president of a sovereign country. Gaza, these have been horrific. Illegal, immoral, unethical actions done by two countries who think they're above international law. It would be very satisfying, gratifying, and healthy for the world if now the tactics that these two countries have developed abroad are now used on their own friends and families. They should use the same level of brutality on their own citizens and on their own partners, fight it out, and teach those cowardly vassals their place. Maybe they'll learn self-respect. Maybe they'll learn to stand up for themselves. Maybe you have to break their backs before they gain the adrenaline they need to pick themselves up.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better. I fully agree with you. They really need a taste of their own medicine. And I feel like some resistance to, American hegemony going down the line might just, wake Americans and, the administration up to some of these atrocities that are actually happening. As long as there's only, a positive reception for their actions and a positive framing, these false narratives, as long as these exist, I feel like it'd be very hard to see any change in the way America behaves abroad. So absolutely.
Yeah, I think the most dangerous thing that could happen is that 2 years from now, the Democrats come back to power, or even in the midterms this year, some Democrats win some useless seats in the House of Representatives and the Senate, and then everyone claps, they tap themselves on the back, and they think, oh, mission accomplished, we did it, we saved America, we saved the world by putting a slightly more human face on it. No, take off the mask, be as brutal at home as you were abroad, and find catharsis and create something new and better. Don't try to fix it through voting. But the populace is too cowardly for that as well. They want to vote and feel good at no cost to themselves, and then some magic, God-sent man of providence, a woman of providence is going to lead them to the sunny fields instead of the dark valley.
Right, absolutely. Like we said earlier, I feel like it would just be. Have you seen that meme with that fighter jet, like with a Republican flag instead of a Democrat flag? So I feel like even if the party changes, the American establishment still behaves in a certain way. The American elite have certain interests. Military-industrial complex has interests, and these are always reflected, no matter who the face of this is. And that's not going to change very easily. I feel like they need a lot of introspection. Absolutely.
Yes, and I even feel that the Democrats and the so-called resistance and even the public are actually happy that for a change, Trump is spending all of his political capital and his aggression abroad because it's saving them. It's saving them from his domestic agenda. That his domestic agenda has basically been frozen for the past few months because he's got his hands full with Venezuela and now with Iran. They're breathing a sigh of relief. They have breathing room. But I believe that if Trump doesn't do more on the domestic front in the next 2 years, not intentionally. I don't think he's going to do this on purpose, but he needs to do as much damage as he can domestically in his remaining term in order for America to become a less immoral actor in international relations. If now the rest of his 2-year term is spent fighting fires abroad and giving breathing room for normalcy to be restored in the US. Normalcy in the US was bad for the rest of the world. The rest of the world was suffering under Biden. It was suffering under Obama. It was suffering under the so-called normal prime minister, under Clinton, because that gave enough domestic stability to get away with all sorts of illegal activities abroad. So America needs to be deconstructed from within into something that's more reflective of their people. And if the people are belligerent, they should become a belligerent country internally. That's what America First is about. Withdraw from the rest of the world. Let us live our own lives. Let us choose our own destinies. And you reshape your country to be the perfect reflection of what you are. And Trump is the perfect reflection of what they are, but he has a limited amount of time. He should reshape the country into what the average American looks like, feels like, believes in. And it'll be healthy for the world. It'll be painful, but it'll be healthy.
Absolutely. And I feel like that's a very, very pragmatic way of kind of offering a solution to this also, because restructuring America, making sure there's a lot of dissent. We do see a lot of American dissent from the young, especially the younger people who are aware of what sort of, domestically, America doesn't really take care of its people, whether it's job security, healthcare, public transport. None of these things are really developed, and that shows how little they care about the citizen. I feel like some of this they're waking up to, but to what extent is unknown, because at the same time that they see this, as the years pass and as people acquire wealth, they see things differently. It's the American dream, and in America, as long as you're able to acquire wealth, they look down upon every other who cannot. So that sort of and whether it's the Democrats or the Republicans, they're vehemently opposed to any sort of socialist policy, and socialism is a word. So I think the American citizen really needs to wake up to they're not being sold. They're being sold like a pipe dream. They don't have basic resources, basic housing, food, and all of that even the poorest countries tend to offer their citizens. So all of this, and looking at the war spending, should really wake them up to some sort of restructuring. So it's a very pragmatic way to look at this. So coming back to the balance of power implications and all of that, the Atlantic alliances have been weakened slightly, as we discussed, but has this managed to strengthen China and the BRICS, or the BRICS rather?
Yes, very much, because Iran is one of the BRICS now. It's not in the acronym, but it's part of the BRICS structure. But with China, it was quite telling that when things didn't go America's way in the Persian Gulf, they withdrew some of their defense equipment from Taiwan, from South Korea, to redeploy it in the Gulf.
Okay.
Which meant that these two outposts, which thought that America was going to come save them, were left undefended. They didn't have proper air defenses for a not insignificant window. And if there had been a very opportunistic regime or administration in Beijing or in Pyongyang, they could have taken advantage of that. They chose not to. They acted with restraint because I think they understand better than the US that these things can backfire. And if you're doing all right with the current trajectory and your adversaries are on the decline, why interrupt them while they're making a mistake? Let your adversaries make mistakes and you play it safe. But it still sent a message to Taiwan and to South Korea that you're not important. That at the drop of a hat, the US can drop its obligations towards you, but you can't drop your obligations to the US because you're completely dependent on them.
Yeah.
And that's quite that's strengthening China's hand for sure. And within the BRICS, I think this whole experience has been very instructive. That, of course, the average Russian is anti-American. The average Chinese citizen is anti-American. But the I in BRICS within India, I saw this for myself in the past 4 months since Venezuela and Iran have dominated the headlines. Even pro-American commentators in the Indian geopolitical sphere have turned against America because, and it's not necessarily because they were blind to it before, but when it happened in Venezuela, it was very illegal. And Venezuela is a country which was, has been marked out as a rogue country. Iran is a country that's been marked out as a rogue country. For the past 10, 11 years, there's been a concerted effort from the Western media to tag India with these rogue countries because it's not sufficiently pro-Western enough. So, we're an authoritarian country, that we're backsliding democratically, that we're no better than Russia or Iran or Venezuela or Syria. Like, to me, there's nothing about being better or worse. You're a sovereign country, you're a member of the UN, you're equal to any other, regardless of your internal domestic system. But it's been painted that way. Now, what has been happening to all of the countries that have been smeared like India was? So in Syria, Assad is gone, Al-Qaeda is in charge. Venezuela had their president kidnapped from the palace, from the capital. Iran is fighting a war of defense, existential defense. So I think this shook things up, that even people who thought that closer economic relations with India, between India and the US, that they thought that this is our moment, that since the first Trump administration, they thought, Trump is trying to move away from China. This is our opportunity to do what Deng Xiaoping did in the 80s and take that manufacturing boost, that we will manufacture for the West, become the factory of the world, and we'll experience great economic growth. But now, there have been statements from important US policymakers who have said, we're not going to repeat the same mistakes we made with China now with India. We're not going to give India the tools that would help it in lifting itself out of poverty and becoming a rival to us and to our trading bloc. So there's that. Plus, in parallel, they've been smearing the country as all sorts of negative epithets, dangerous for minorities, authoritarian, police state, God knows what. So this has led to a backlash that previously pro-American commentators, previously pro-American policymakers are seeing that we're not special. Just because we're big and economically useful to trade with doesn't mean we're immune to the negative externalities of American foreign policy. That what happened to Iran, what happened to Venezuela, it could happen to us. Just because we're big or just because we have 1 million soldiers doesn't mean this can't happen. It can happen. If the US wants it to happen, they could make it happen. And that means we need to learn to be more self-reliant, to be, the best way to be a sovereign state is to start acting like one. Our current administration has tried to essentially buy its way into America's good books. That, we can buy the expensive helicopters, we can, let you send your Harley Davidsons to be imported here, just leave us alone. But that, you can't deal with the mafia like that. You're dealing with a mafia regime that it perceives this as weakness. It's not, you're not being accommodating, you're not being conciliatory, you're being weak, and weakness will be punished, and it is being punished. So this is a very important time for us to realize that America is not coming to save us, it's not coming to build us up as the next China. We have to do this on our own, and we have to focus on domestic consolidation. We need to move away from the very divisive political rhetoric that has taken hold over the past few years. We need to focus on creating a grand narrative. Where does India want to be 50 years from now, 100 years from now? What is the goal? And construct a glorious narrative like China has, that this is what China is going to be like in 2100. Make it inspiring and gather people so that you're pulling them, that they want to, they create a pull factor, that come be part of this glorious future we're building. And currently there's, because of the constant election cycles, there is no vision being projected for the future. It's just about, we need to win the next election. Every 6 months, every 3 months, there's some useless election, municipal level in Maharashtra. Who cares about that? The prime minister, the current party, has been in power for 12 years, used the power to create institutions, to create a vision for the future, instead of just this election winning machine wherein the right-wing voters go in, and then this amorphous policy comes out where going to make everyone happy, going to make Americans happy, going to make minorities happy, going to make all these. You try too hard to make everyone happy. It just shows your weakness, because you're not creating a grand narrative where people want to join. You're bribing different factions. You're bribing ex-castes. You're bribing OBCs. You're bribing minorities. Please don't rebel and just play along with it. No, we're not supposed to be playing along with it. We're supposed to be co-owners of the nation, of our future. And we want to make a future country that makes us proud, makes our ancestors proud. It's a very simple, simple philosophy behind it. It's something everyone can be part of. But you have to dream big. And then they stopped dreaming big. They stopped dreaming big a long time ago because of international pressure, because of the US, because the administration is afraid of America. Ever since the special status of Jammu and Kashmir was revoked. Since then, there has been no defining domestic Indian policy that has come from the capital, from the cabinet. Everything has been happening through the courts. There's no ambition because they're scared of the backlash. They're scared, of what happened with the CAA and NRC. They're scared of Shaheen Bagh. They're scared of sanctions. They're scared of, what will America say? What will America? Well, what did it gain you? America's still beating you with the stick. You're still getting soft sanctions in other ways. You're still getting a trade war. You're still getting screwed on petrol. You're the ones. So they stopped importing Iranian oil. Did that get us anywhere? We pulled out of Chahar Bahar 2 weeks before this operation started. If we still had access there, that would have made us a very useful power in this conflict. We sent our prime minister to Israel, shaking hands with war criminals 1 week before they launched this. These are bad miscalculations, and they're happening because we're trying to appease everyone. We're trying to appease the wrong people internally, and we're trying to appease the wrong people externally. Instead of just serving the mandate that's been given to the party, to the government, there were very clear promises made, very clear expectations from the voters, but there's no intention to carry them out. It's just survival.
You're absolutely right. I feel like the focus has been retaining power and appeasement at all levels rather than doing anything constructive. Like you said, there has been, despite 10, 12 years of power, there has been no construction of a national vision, no inspiring words about what we're headed towards as a country, no messages of social cohesion. It's always divisive rhetoric that's meted out even by this supposedly right wing party. It's all in all very extremely disappointing. But I want to discuss India's role a little more. But before we get into that, I just want to ask you one last question about China and how China has been like benefiting from this, and then we'll jump to specific questions.
Mm-hmm. Sure. So in terms of China, they are relatively less affected by the Strait of Hormuz being closed. They are a major industrial power. They can produce everything they need domestically, so they're not necessarily dependent on raw materials being imported from the Gulf or through there. They get their minerals from Australia. They get coal, they get iron, they get copper from Australia. That's unblocked. They produce stuff and they ship it to the US. They have the whole Pacific to do that. So simply by doing nothing, they're already gaining, while everyone else is experiencing, shortages of fuel or cost of living increase, because the other countries have dependencies through that whole corridor, through the Gulf states. They're dependent on oil and gas from there. They're dependent on shipping lines there. And China also, as part of the BRICS, is allowed to send its ships through the strait, I believe. They also have the second largest navy in the world, so they can project power wherever they want, just like the US can. So I don't think the Chinese are experiencing any reduction in their power. But others are receding, and even if China stood still, then it's, in relative terms, improving. And I think it's not standing still; it's still moving forward despite these challenges.
Makes sense. How come China is largely unaffected by the fuel crisis?
Well, China is not necessarily dependent on the same fuel sources as other countries are. I mean, the US is not majorly affected by it either. The US has chose to become a big oil producer themselves, to wean themselves off Gulf oil. They had Canada turn into a major oil producer, and Canadian oil, there's not enough consumers in Canada to absorb the excess production. So Canadian oil, which is very, very inefficient to extract, very, very bad for the climate because it's not drilled, it's from tar sands, so it's surface level. That is now one of their major exports. They export it to the US. And then maybe the reason why they tried to do a regime change in Venezuela before embarking on this adventure in Iran was to lock down one more source of oil within the Americas as part of the America First strategy, and then you don't care what happens to your Saudi and Emirati oil producers.
Yes, yeah.
And then I mean, China also has access to Russian oil. Russia produces a lot of oil; it exports a lot of oil, and they have a land border, so that can even be transported by pipe. It doesn't need shipping.
Yeah, that's true. So we'll come back to India, and we kind of talk about how India has been impacted by all of this strategically, and are we uniquely isolated from the rest of the world during this conflict, or do we stand to gain, lose anything through this?
India was placed in a very difficult position by this war, and I think that was that led to some level of policy paralysis for the first week of the war, as North and South Bloc tried to find their bearings, tried to understand what was happening, by whom, and where we stood in this. It was a great betrayal of India and our position in international affairs that the U.S. attacked a ship returning from a friendly naval exercise in India. That we had invited multiple countries to Visakhapatnam for friendly naval exercises. They marched through our streets, and both Iran and the U.S. were invited. It's not that we only invited the wrong states or anti-American. We invited a wide set of states. They all took part with unarmed vessels purely for friendly purposes. Now, the US was aware of this because they took part in the same exercises. Mm-hmm. As soon as 3 Iranian ships left Indian territorial waters, in the international waters between India and Sri Lanka, the US attacks them illegally. There was no declaration of war, and they were unarmed, and they sunk one of the ships and refused to save the drowning soldiers. There are multiple acts of illegality. One of the oldest international laws, older than any treaty, older than the UN, it's 1,000 years old, is the law of the sea, which means you're obliged to save anyone who's drowning, anyone who's capsized, anyone whose ship has sunk. Yes. From ancient times, like 2,000 years ago, 200 years ago, people believe this because it's a civilisational value. And this is something ignored. In fact, it was gloated about. That the US was very proud that they watched the Iranian sailors die, they watched them drown, and did nothing to help them. This was, I think, quite a shocking betrayal of both Iran by the US, but also of India by the US. In addition, there was a foreign policy misstep. The Indian Prime Minister should not have gone to Israel during a time when Israel is being vilified all around the world. They have never been disliked more. Bibi Netanyahu has never been disliked more. And we subjected ourselves to being hyphenated with Israel by going and putting on a show, shaking hands and giving a speech at the Knesset. That our Prime Minister went and did that. And then 1 week later, they attack Iran, who is a much closer partner of India than Israel ever has been or is or will be. So I think that was a big foreign policy shock. It was unexpected that 2 countries that India has been aggressively trying to court, even though they pretend to play nice but are secretly hostile to India. India's been trying to play nice with the US and with Israel, appealing to their vanity, buying their military equipment. Both countries, then took advantage of our, conciliatory or, weak attitude and attacked Iran, and also attacked Iran in our backyard. And that led to immense reputational damage for India because it made it look like India was in on this. It made it look like we betrayed Iran, which we didn't. But we're caught so far on the back step. It took 1 week to respond to the allegations, and then it wasn't pushed hard enough because the foreign ministry thinks, you release a statement on social media and you upload a PDF on all the embassy websites, and some babu gives a press conference, and that's it. You need to be aggressively courting the media. You need to be phoning up journalists and editors saying, let me put the record straight, that we actually rescued one of the Iranian ships and brought it back to Indian waters and saved the second one from being sunk. That there was one which was too far in, it couldn't turn back in time, and that's the one that got sunk. Not that we escorted them into a trap. But then we're not a serious country. If you're a serious country, then you would have acted serious about it. Acted completely passive, no proactive. There's no proactive narrative management. But even when you've been damaged so badly by this, you're still passive. You're just reactive, and you do the bare minimum, and that's done. It didn't, it didn't redeem us. We're still embarrassed. And then I think about 10 or 12 days into the war, then our prime minister calls Tehran, and they have a call. And then that was the first big indication that, okay, we're on Iran's side. Iran is the victim here, and we're not part of it. It took too long, and it was done too passively. And especially, the sequence of things, like withdrawing from Bahar, the trip to Israel, the sinking of the Iranian ship after coming to our exercises, that ruined, these three things ruined whatever strategic positioning we had to affect the outcome of this war, to act as a credible partner. And now, since then, it's been 3 months of trying to claw back our credibility, which is a shame. I don't think I don't think India has played a very smart hand on this. But also, I don't agree with people who are praising Pakistan. Oh, look, Pakistan is a mediator, and all the negotiations are happening there. That's not any clever foreign policy on their hand. That's them doing what they've always done. They've always been a garrison state for American interests, and they've always been one of the countries that acts as a middleman between the US and Iran since the Iranian Revolution, since 1979. So it's not that I wouldn't recommend India play that part, because I think that's also damaging. Then you look like an idiot for hosting these futile peace talks, and you're just shuttling around like a courier or a messenger. But also, just from a purely legal, ethical, moral perspective, or even from a purely self-interested perspective, I don't think India's played the right moves. And it will take some deft diplomacy to address this, because we also are quite close to the Gulf monarchies. And they're also grumbling now about the US. So I think the way forward is to see if those countries are planning to disengage from the US in the future, if that's something that India and the BRICS can be a part of. And if we look back at these entangling alliances that the US does, I think one of the biggest mistakes in foreign policy was that in the 90s, the EU and NATO were allowed to absorb the Eastern European countries, Central and Eastern European countries. They were already a trading bloc. They were Comic-Con. They were already a defensive pact, the Warsaw Pact. They should have been allowed to continue with those minus Russia. That would have been healthier. That you still have regional-based alliances. So with no superpower, they're self-organized and are trading with each other and are engaged in collective defense, but not with so many countries that it becomes meaningless. Similarly, the Gulf states need to do the same and try to involve Iran, create a common security structure between the Gulf and Iran against countries like Turkey and Israel and Azerbaijan, who are the real troublemakers.
True. So, do you think India has managed to kind of repair, or Modi, has he kind of managed to repair our relationship with Iran? And also, like, is there something to, do with Israel? Is there something that we should do strategically in terms of stepping back from, a close association with Israel? Or what do you think our position should be going forward?
It's hard to say whether we've repaired our relationship with Iran. We should be importing this, the same level of Iranian oil that we were at our peak before we can say that things are back to normal with Iran. And we should be playing a large part in Bahar, in the port over there. Until those are restored, I would not consider it normalcy, no matter how friendly and chummy they are, shaking hands or talking on the phone. With Israel, it's a dangerous country to know. You know what they said about Lord Byron: mad, bad, and dangerous to know. It's best to keep your hands far from them, keep them at arm's length. Just as one does with Pakistan or even Azerbaijan. These are unpredictable countries that which are as dangerous to their friends as they are to their enemies, because all three of them have learned from the US. The US is the master of this. There's a number of countries in the world where the people have become more anti-Zionist and anti-Israel based on what they've seen over the last 3 years, but the governments don't necessarily reflect that. That's unhealthy for society. I think India is a similar country now. It didn't happen right away with Gaza, but now the disproportionality with which Gaza has been obliterated, and then Iran has been bombarded, and Lebanon has been occupied. That has soured even a number of otherwise pro-Israeli people. There's many people in India who, for better or worse, they think Israel is an inspiring country. Not necessarily because they agree with what Israel has done, but they think that Israel is a religious revivalist country. It's been a fellow victim of terrorism. For sentimental reasons, they think that Israel is our friend.
Yeah.
But I don't consider the country a victim of terrorism. They funded Hamas themselves. They funded terrorist organizations. They funded radical Islamist organizations because it was domestically convenient for them to say, we can't negotiate with them. They're religious extremists. Because in the past, there used to be left-wing Palestinian organizations, the PLFP, People's Front for Liberation of Palestine. There used to be secular nationalist Palestinian organizations. There were Palestinian Christians who were campaigning for Palestine. These were normal politicians who could be reasoned with. And the Israeli government, especially the right-wing parties in Israel, especially Netanyahu, didn't want to have adversaries who were normal, who could be negotiated with. He wanted a monster. So he built up a monster so that he could say, there's a monster, it's coming to eat you, and I'm the only one protecting you, until the monster became too big. And right. And so I don't consider, if you fund the terrorists and they come and bite you, if you, have a, you keep mad dogs or snakes in your gardens and they bite you, then, I don't consider you a victim. And I think now people have realized that this was, their reaction to the October 7th attacks was disproportionate and targeted at civilians. And right. Now is overspilling into Iran and to Lebanon. And I think now there has been an awakening within India where people are much more skeptical of the value of friendship with such a country, or the value of being associated with such a country. And absolutely. I hope that we can reflect this in our foreign policy. Unlike countries in the West, where now people have had the similar realization, but the government ignores what the people are saying and just bows to this unique country which they feel must be defended at all costs. I think where we've historically been very proud of being a neutral country, a non-aligned country, we're not obliged to praise or criticize any country. And we're not part of some entangling alliance that we're married to this entity. So yeah, I think it's time to reevaluate what value does this bring us? Like what have they done for us? Is it just sentimentality that drives this? Because sentimentality now is driving us against them.
Yes. It's precisely it. I feel like also just having a common enemy in our eyes, which are the radical Islamists, perhaps led that. And also the projection of strength of Israel that I feel like some Indians really, want to echo in their own civilizational trajectory. I feel like that sort of aspirational look at Israel has clouded the judgment, their judgment in terms of what Israel truly is. We're not similar in any respect, apart from
we're much more similar to Palestine. We're much more, we're the country that was partitioned to give the religious nutters their garrison state in which then they attack us. So who's the Palestine? Who's the Israel in the Indian subcontinent? It's very clear that India is the Palestine. Gets zero international sympathy, constantly facing aggression from a country with no culture, with no history, that is powered by a religiously radicalized military. It's very clear what the parallels are, and you're very correct in saying that there's a significant proportion of people in India who, because India is a weak, unserious, and impotent power, they see this twisted version of what they think a serious country looks like. That, oh, look at how when in Entebbe the plane was hijacked, they stormed it with they sent their commandos to Uganda, they stormed it and they rescued people. Compare that to our Indian Airlines flight in 1999, which was hijacked to Kandahar. Yes, that was very humiliating and formative for many people, that we just paid the terrorists. We released 3 terrorist masterminds to release our the hostages from that plane. So of course, when people compare that and they're like, oh, why can't we have done that? Why can't? So then, and this is not just with India. There's many countries, post-colonial countries, which have self-image issues, who have a very nationalist or religious population, but a very weak state that doesn't reflect them. So it can be India, it can be Nigeria. Nigeria is similar, where there's people who have nothing to do with Israel. If they went to Israel, they would probably be racially humiliated. But because they see it as like their idea of, oh, this is what a serious country is, why can't my country be like that? Then they support Israel because their country is weak, and it's unfortunate. And this is why it all comes down to your own country needs to be strong, so that you don't live vicariously through the twisted actions of some third party who doesn't care if you live or die. And people don't seem to understand there's a distinction. Israel likes India. It doesn't like Indians.
Yes.
Israel likes the concept of India. It likes that there's this big country that it can trade with. Israelis like coming to India and making their little enclaves in Goa and Himachal Pradesh so that they can do drugs and forget about the war crimes they just did in Palestine. They like that there's a country that's easy to manipulate and sell weapons to. They hate Indians. You go to Israel, you will experience that. You meet Israelis, you will experience that. You go to Himachal and try to go to one of the Israeli cafes there. Go to Goa and go to one of the Israeli raves there, and you will experience it for yourself.
You're absolutely right. That I think Indians need to wake up to this, and so does the state. Again, our state is doing less and less in reflecting our sentiments. I feel like in the beginning of the Modi regime, this was a far better communication between what the people want to reflect about themselves and what the state had been doing. But I feel like that connection has decreased, like you said, a lot of domestic blunders in terms of policy. So let's see what happens. But I'll just jump into my next question, which is how do you think India should plan to either reduce its dependence on oil imports, maybe develop renewable energy over the next few years, or should it go back to importing from Iran, increase its dependency there? Like, what do you think the best move going forward? Because we can't just live with this fuel crisis forever. I feel like we'd be like severely affected.
Yes.
So what do you think?
I think it's a golden opportunity to reorient our economy. That we've had 12 years to do this at our own pace. And there's been a national renewable energy mission. There's been subsidies for electric cars. There's been induction stoves and rooftop solar, which is all good. I think the baseline is there. But as is often the case with a country like India, sometimes you need a crisis to actually wean yourself off the old ways and embrace the new. So of course, we value stability. So you value not shaking things up too much. So then it was done very slowly. We're not the kind of country which says overnight, now we'll only switch to electric cars, because then it causes chaos, and then, God knows which municipal election the party will lose. So, very sensitive to electoral concerns. So you don't do anything that might upset anyone. But now, if you are experiencing a oil crisis, or something that really jeopardizes social stability, economic growth, that is an opportunity, because if untreated, then you're going to lose the election anyway. You're going to become unpopular anyway. So you might as well become less unpopular doing something slightly inconvenient than a slow trajectory downwards. So this is a great opportunity to really invest big in renewable energy. We have great potential for solar power. We have great potential for wind power, tidal as well. And now, in the past few years, electric cars, have reached the level where it's mainstream, and this is an opportunity to really push that. China went from producing terrible internal combustion cars to having the most advanced electric cars in the world within 6 or 7 years. It's happened in front of our eyes. And now they dominate production, but not just in numbers, they dominate the technology that other countries can't keep up. That Porsche is dying, Volkswagen is dying, Ford is dying, because they didn't take that leap into the future. They thought they could have one foot in internal combustion, one foot in electric, and now they make both terribly. So the Indian car industry has gone soft. It's been protected too long through soft protectionism, through tariffs, which is hard protectionism, but also through the stupid sub 4 meter rule, where if you make a car very small and short and crappy, it gets tax benefits. Scrap that all and put the tax incentives into making electric cars mainstream. Switch public transport to, of course, consumer behavior is difficult to change, but the government makes purchasing decisions all the time. In the early 2000s, when there was the first big wave of pollution in Delhi, what was the big change that led to 5 years of clean air in Delhi? It was when every DTC bus and every auto rickshaw and every taxi in Delhi was switched from diesel to CNG. Now, that was something that could be rolled out very quickly, because that wasn't consumer behavior. That was, government regulatory decision. Similarly, now this is your opportunity. You can create massive demand for the production of electric vehicles by mandating, okay, now as a response, we're switching all of our city buses to electric. We're going to switch all Ubers from a certain time onwards to electric, all taxis, all auto rickshaws. That creates enough demand at the factories that they will invest in increased production, and then that surplus production will bring the price down, and electric cars will be competitive with internal combustion cars. It's the same principle as LED bulbs. That 20 years ago, we had to do the transition from filament bulbs to CFL, chlorofluoro, the spiral ones, and then the LEDs. The LEDs used to be really expensive at first. It was hard to acquire, it was hard to manufacture. But then once you had a certain level of production, then the market was ready, because then you could flood the market with LEDs. You gave people a choice. Do you want the filament bulb, which if you shake it too hard it breaks, it lasts for 3 months, or do you want the LED which lasts for 5 years? If the prices are similar, or even if the LED is slightly, it costs 20% more, the consumers will choose the better product. Even poor consumers will choose the better product, because they understand the value of it lasting longer and having lower running costs than one time saving money. So, and this is across all technology, renewable energy. So people have already switched to induction stoves almost overnight. That when the crisis began, within 2 days, all the induction stoves on Amazon India were sold out. That's a good sign. Now they'll produce more. And then more will flood the market, the price will collapse, and it will become the mainstream option. And then that's a good way to transition away from LPG. And so it'll be the same with electric cars if you show some boldness in policy. And I don't want to hear ethanol mixing the sugarcane juice into the petrol. That's something they do in Brazil. And one thing that no commentator has said here, but that I've seen from Brazil, it's a form of protectionism. The fact that in Brazil all the cars are mandated to run on that biofuel mix means that their special domestic models, which can't be sold elsewhere, are protected and good products can't come in. So Volkswagen in Brazil makes like special cars, which are not built to the same standard as Volkswagen in Germany. Similarly, in India, we're sold substandard cars by even by the biggest producer, Maruti Suzuki. When it sells the Swift abroad, it passes all the crash tests. But when they send the Indian one for the same crash test, it gets 0 stars. So this is an incentive to improve quality and not to dilute quality further with ethanol blending and God knows what. That's not the solution. And that's just exchanging our water table. That's a new form of extraction, that now we're turning our water table into a still inefficient form of fuel.
Yes, absolutely. Again, that's a huge topic in itself. It's apparently bad for the car as well, like the longevity of the engine. And on top of which, sugarcane is a cash crop, and it makes no sense to convert that into biomass fuel. So I'm not sure, though it decreases some sort of dependency, you need to think about a long-term solution anyway. So this is going to solve anything. We have a huge impending water crisis. So I'm not sure how, and that is far worse than any fuel crisis. So I'm not sure what they're going to do.
Yes, exactly.
So yeah, you're right.
You can't import water to put into the underground reservoirs and water tables.
Absolutely, exactly. And also, no, it makes no sense. It's again, most cities now have a water crisis. It's just hard to support this sort of population, this sort of construction and development that's happening. Everything needs water, and that's a far more crucial resource than fuel. So temporarily decreasing dependence on fossil fuels isn't gonna help you. So it feels very, very short-sighted. It feels very frustrating, and especially for the consumer, right? You did not reflect a change in the prices when the barrel price went down, and now they're keeping it high while also blending it and affecting the longevity of our engines. So it's a very frustrating time to be a consumer.
No, it is, and this is something that needs to be addressed, because I think the companies and the government are treating India as a low margin market with low information consumers. You see this especially in the food industry, that food standards are A, terrible to begin with, and B, are not enforced properly. And that's why every week there's some expose about fake paneer or adulteration in foodstuffs, or just poor quality of control. So the enforcement, ease of doing business is all well and good. I think we've become good at that. But I think the next revolution needs to be a consumer revolution. That I sincerely believe that the quality of products in India has gone down dramatically in the past 20 years. There was a time when people very proudly said, "Oh, I bought the Indian manufactured product and not the Chinese one because it was built to a higher standard," and that's no longer the case. You go to the market, they would be like, "Oh, this is the Chinese mal. The Chinese mal was bad," and now it's reversed.
Yes, you're right. My the last few questions I have for you are about Pakistan, and we'll quickly discuss this before we close. But what has Pakistan's involvement been in the peace talks? And as you said, it's just they're be acting gleeful about this, but it's their job. Like you said, they are often the voice or the conduit through which the US chooses to speak to India. So, what do you think about this? Has it been necessitated by its defense pact by Saudi, or is it just a purely American diplomacy thing?
Neither, actually. So since 1979, the Iranian interests in Washington, D.C. have been routed through the Pakistani embassy there. So similarly, the US and Cuba don't have diplomatic relations. So Cuba sends whatever diplomatic messages it has for the US through the Swiss embassy in Washington, D.C. So they find a third party who's willing to act as the conduit. So for Cuba, it's Switzerland. For Iran, it's Pakistan. So essentially, the US gets its intel on Iran indirectly, and Iran sends its communications to the US indirectly. So there's always some conduit needed because they can't do it bilaterally. And essentially, because Pakistan is functioning in this role in DC anyway, and B, after Imran Khan was deposed and the new regime came to power in the US, Trump loves them. It was seen as a credible mediator, or not even mediator, courier between the two parties in this conflict. So enough that they were willing to hold the peace talks there. So it's not some great change in anyone's attitude. I think this was just normal. I think people are learning about it through this, and of course Pakistan is very skilled at PR and spends a lot of money on that. So of course for them it's a foreign policy win, and they're portraying it at that look. We're so relevant. We're the peacemakers. But if there's no peace, then it's all moot.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a long-standing arrangement, kind of unrelated to this crisis, but I feel like they've been projecting it as such.
Yes, yeah, and then they have many, sympathetic voices in the Indian commentariat who are like, "Oh, look at what they're doing. Why can't we do that? It's because of X, Y, Z." No, I don't think we were ever in the running to do that. No one. Has anyone done this before for other conflicts? No. So then, why would we magically be thought of in this case? We're not useful enough to either side to be doing this.
Exactly, and I think. Are you okay?
Yes.
So some of Indian media has actually projected Pakistan as being, involved in the peace talks and all of that. It's it's kind of weird, but it's just like a misunderstanding. Like it's Pakistani PR kind of having the effect it's supposed to have.
Yeah, it's not even a misunderstanding. The Indian media loves Pakistan and wishes that we were more like Pakistan, but they need to be careful what they wish for. They, for better or worse, believe that we all need to hold hands and get along. And for that, they think by making Pakistan look positive, look like a normal country, then this can be achieved. But it's not a normal country. And if in Palestine or in Lebanon there was a newspaper that was always saying, "Oh, look how humane Israel is, look how kind they are, look how everything is so rosy over there, why can't we be like them?" They would be hounded out of the country, and it's our shame that we haven't done the same.
You're absolutely right. I think we're going to end on that note. That brings me to the end of my questions. Do you have any closing thoughts for us? I think this was brilliant.
Well, thank you for the great questions.
Yeah. No, I learned so much from this actually. So do you have any closing thoughts for us?
Actually, I think your questions have been so comprehensive this time around. I don't have anything else to add. I think it's just important for all of our viewers, or anyone who's rooted in either foreign policy or in Indian civilizational revival or knowledge systems, to understand the world we operate in, to understand beyond the surface level, why things happen the way they do, so that we can also find our footing and act as a serious nation, and not as a parody of a serious nation, like we've discussed. That just because we feel that our country is is a weak state or soft state, doesn't mean we have to overcompensate and become a Rambo state, like like Israel. It's about finding a polity that is a vehicle for our aspirations, to create a society, to create a future which we can be proud of and which our ancestors can be proud of. And essentially, that's what it comes down to. Regardless of all the divisive rhetoric or the identity politics, we all want to create a better future for our future generations. And we all want to make our previous generations proud of us and what we've achieved. And I want everyone to embrace that philosophy and use that as your guide when judging world events or public policy. That will this make the lives of your future generations better, and will it make your ancestors proud?
Absolutely. That's so well put. Thank you so much, Ruchir ji, for joining us today. I'm going to close out this episode, but it was lovely. Thank you so much.
Likewise. Thank you so much. Namaskar, everyone.
Okay.